County, Imperial County, and Orange County, as well as Los Angeles, if I did not say that already. And you can have graduated from a university in the SCAG region within the last 12 months. So technically, I could apply for a story map, but I'm not going to do that. Those are the base rules. If you use photos, which are my colleague at Esri will go over, you have to make sure that they're open sourced, and also you have permission to use photos and videos into it. And then that's kind of mostly the rundown. Like I said, the pamphlet that has been sent out and is posted online will give you a lot more information on the specific requirements for submitting your story maps for this year. So without further ado, I'm going to hand off the ropes to my colleague Byrne at Esri. He is an excellent professional in understanding how story maps work and function. He's going to give us a tutorial today. He's also has an excellent blog on Esri's webpage. If you, I will send out his full name and spelling so you can check out his blog on the Esri website. So without further ado, here's Byrne.
Thanks, Lyle. I've shared my screen. Can everybody see that, Lyle? Can you confirm?
Yes, I can confirm we can see your screen.
Okay, great. Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Byrne Zakowski, and I've been at Esri a very long time, and one of the products I've been involved with since inception is story maps. So without further ado, let's just plunge right in. So your mission here is to author a sustainability planning story using Arcgis story maps. And if you've been working with story maps for a while, you'll know that we've recently made a shift. Over the last year, we've sort of moved away from what we call our classic story maps, and we've introduced our next gen story maps. The big difference is that with the classic story maps, each had its own unique builder experience. And what we decided to do is sort of bring all those experiences together into one builder, and that's what we have right now. There's been a change in spelling and things like that as well, but at any rate, this event will focus on the next gen story maps, and that's what you're to use to fulfill the project. There are showcase resources online. There's a group that I assembled a lot of the content that I will be using today, including this PowerPoint presentation. And when you do find that group, it's linked on the website. Anytime you see that little finger pressing, that's the link that'll take you right there. So you can open up the group and take a look at all these resources, which include this presentation, links to the SCAG Open Data Portal, the Living Atlas, as well as an example story map, which is in itself a tutorial to help you get started. All right, so let's begin. ArcGIS story maps are intended to help you tell great stories with maps that inform and inspire. As I mentioned, they use a builder, and the builder contains blocks which help you lay out your text, your media, and of course your maps. And the main place to go for that is storymaps.arcgis.com. Here's a collection of resources which you can browse. And once you get to that site, you'll find an overview, you'll find some selected story maps that the team likes, and you can take a look at those and gain a little bit of inspiration and insight about what you might want to do for this challenge. And there's also that tutorial story map, which talks about blocks and explains the different ways that you can work with them. When you open up the PDF, you can just click any of these links to take you right there. Otherwise, the Story Maps website will have all these available through tabs at the top of the page. So what do you need to make a great story? Well, the first thing you need is an idea or some inspiration, and then a little bit of thought about how you're going to approach telling your story. You're going to need some media, and these could be videos, there'll be images, there could be all sorts of things that you'll be able to find. As Lau mentioned, we want to make sure that you've got the appropriate privileges, appropriate permissions to use whatever photos and images that you're going to use in your story map. And I'll highlight a couple of places that you can go to for public domain, any use, okay images and videos and so forth. And of course, you'll need some maps, and these can be 2D maps or they can be 3D scenes. There are maps that you can find and also maps that you will craft using some of the Southern California Association of Governments content. All right, so your steps for success here are put some thought before you dive into the story. And a lot of people will actually outline the story and think about the content that they'll want to insert and where and start evolving the text. Do that before you even start authoring. Then, once you've identified some of the different components you might want to use, whether they be videos or whether they be maps, prepare those, gather them together, and get ready to add them to your story map. Then you can start building your story, and from there it's a process of refinement. So you refine your story, you simplify it. The simpler stories are always better, and then keep repeating until you're satisfied with the results. When you're finished, you're going to want to publish and share your story publicly so you can submit it as part of the competition. When you share your story publicly, it will actually check to see if all of the content that you've used, your maps, apps, whatever else you've added in there, is also shared the same way. So there's a check that happens in the background to make sure that your entire story will be available. You can always test this in a private browser or share it with others and have them take a look at it. So one of the things you're going to be doing is working with maps and layers to create maps. And where do you find those? Well, ArcGIS Online is the place to go, and you have an account. Some of you might be using a developer account. Some of you are using a student account through your university. Some of you might be using a public account. But the experience is after you sign in, you search for owner SCAG GIS admin. So that's the owner of the content that you're intended to use throughout this competition. And again, when you open up that PDF of this PowerPoint, you'll see a link which will take you directly to that search. Once you've searched, you can also filter by type. So you can search for web maps or you can search for layers, and I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes here. Another place that you can find maps and layers is the ArcGIS Living Atlas. So you can complement and extend the SCAG content that you'll find with ArcGIS Living Atlas. It's a collection of curated authoritative content from Esri and the global GIS user community. There's lots of content there which might help you craft an interesting story. You'll find demographics, you'll find transportation information, lots of things there which might be useful. And I'll show you a couple of ways that you can access Living Atlas content while you're creating a map, and also directly from the Living Atlas website. Another place to find maps and layers you can use is the SCAG Open Data Portal. So this is a portal that contains the same maps and apps that you will find through your ArcGIS online search, but they're just presented in a slightly different way. So once you go to the portal, you'll be able to use search or explore different data categories to find content that you can use or that you can use to make maps from. And I will show you this as well. A couple of things that you're going to keep in mind is that some of the data is unfinished. It's raw, and some of it is actually quite large. So to make nice maps that are performant in your story maps, you're going to have to apply just a little bit of tradecraft. One of the things that you'll find is, depending on which layers you discover, there might be lots of features, or the features might encompass the entire SCAG area, but you want to focus on one community. So you can use filters to filter down to the particular content that you're interested in. Also, to increase performance, you can use scale dependencies, and you can also change the way that the information is styled to highlight or visualize certain aspects of that data. So you can use some of the basic thematic mapping, what we call smart mapping in ArcGIS Online, to make a better presentation of the content. You'll also find that the content has kind of raw attribute information. And what we like to do when we think about creating a great map is that we'll want to configure those pop-ups to make them not just display attributes, but display information in a meaningful way. And I'll cover all these topics briefly. So once you've made your map and applied some basic map craft, you'll want to save it, you'll want to share it publicly, and then to be able to find it really quickly while you're authoring your story map, favorite that map that you just made. And you'll see a little button in the item pages to favorite that, and I'll show you a couple of other places that you can find that little star that you click to favorite, and that just makes it easy to find when you're creating your story map. Now, another aspect of your story map is going to be media. You're going to want to add some photographs. Some of those you can take a look at the SCAG website and see what they have available. SCAG website is also an interesting place to go to understand topics that might be of interest to SCAG and also gain some background information about some of the projects and some of the ways that SCAG is applying themselves throughout the community. So that's a good place to start. Other places you can go are Pixabay, Unsplash. These are great places that have public domain images that you're free to use in your ArcGIS story maps, and Esri staff uses these all the time. You'll also find some SCAG videos on YouTube and also on Vimeo, and you can just go there and you can search and discover that, interestingly enough, SCAG, I think, is an acronym for a type of farming equipment. So you might have to search for Southern California Association of Governments to find exactly what you're looking for. So there's additional resources, as I've mentioned already. We do have a SCAG Story Map Challenge group, which contains all this content. And you can also search using another key phrase, tags:/SCAG labs will let you locate all of the content that I've not only added to the group, but I'm also going to be adding and using throughout this demonstration. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at how to do some things. And I'll save some time at the end for questions. If Lyle wants to interject, please feel free to do so at any time, and we'll take some questions at the end. So this is that group containing the content that will help you get started. So here is the PowerPoint presentation that I just showed in PDF format. There's the flyer, and I've got links to Living Atlas content, one of the maps that I'm going to be using, the SCAG Open Data Portal, and also a story map, which kind of introduces the Story Map Challenge and also shows different ways that you can create story maps using blocks. But let's begin by making a map. So all of you are going to sign in, and I'm starting here at arcgis.com/home, and I'll just go ahead and sign in as you will using my account credentials. All right, so here I've signed in, and what you first see when you sign in will be a little bit different than what I see right now. So I'm an administrator in my organization, so this is my administration console. Likely you might go to your home page or some other destination. So this is the home page of my organization. Now, there are different ways that you can, or different places that you can find that SCAG content. One is at the home. You can click on the search tool, and again, I just search for owner : SCAG GIS admin, and that will return a list of all of the SCAG content. One thing you'll have to note is that when you first do that search, it checks within your organization first. The SCAG content will, of course, be outside of your organization, so you'll want to move that slider. And here we have this content that you can see that's available from SCAG. You can also filter those if you'd like. So if you're looking for layers to build a map, you can kind of choose layers. If you're looking for some maps that you might want to refine and again use, you can filter them on the left. So there's a couple of different ways that you can locate and identify SCAG content. Most of us, though, what I will do is I'll begin by creating a new map. So here's a brand new map, and one of the decisions that you'll make along the way, and you can make this at any time, is which base map you might use. So depending on how the data is styled or what you're looking to do, different base maps might be better than others. So there's lots of different base maps to choose from. What you see in your collection in the base map gallery will be different likely than mine, because this is controlled by the administrator of your organization. But all of you should have a nice selection of different base maps that have been produced by Esri, and to use different ones, you can just go ahead and click on those, and they each have different characteristics, use different content. Let's zoom in here to the Los Angeles area, and we'll take a look at a couple of others. You're likely to have the National Geographic style base map, which is a nice looking base map. There's base maps that are kind of meant to kind of hide in the background. So here's one called Human Geography, and it doesn't have a lot of colors because this is one that you might use if you don't want it to compete with the other content that you want to add to your map. So let's go ahead and let's start with this as my base map. And I'm going to add content from SCAG, and I do that by clicking Add and then Search for Layers. And instead of looking in my content, I'm going to look throughout ArcGIS Online and then type in owner : SCAG GIS admin, and that will filter, spelling error, that will filter for the content that we want to use to make our map. So here's a list of all of the layers that have been published by SCAG, and you can scroll down through those and explore them. You can also type in an additional keyword to help filter the search. So here at the top is the urbanized areas from SCAG. So to add them to the map, I can just click this little plus button, and you'll see that content appear on the map. And to remove it from the map, if I decide I don't want to use it, I can just go and click that minus button. But let's go ahead and begin working with this, and I'll show you a couple of things that you might need to think about and do. Once you've added content to your map, you can use the arrow to go back to your map contents. And as I click on the map with this particular layer, nothing is happening. And that's because the pop-up is not enabled. So in order for you to learn more about the data and begin refining it, you're going to want to open it up. This actually has a sublayer, and I click on the title to open the sublayer, and then here in the context menu, I will see Enable Pop-up. So this allows me to click on the data, click on the layer in the map, and learn more about it. So there's a lot of attribute information that's displayed here. Some of the things that I might be interested in are well, here's the name of the urbanized area, and it looks like we also have acreage here. So let's refine this a little bit. First thing I'll do is I will configure that pop-up, and we can adjust the title. Let's just call this urban areas. So that'll just be the title of our pop-up. And I have some choices here. I can either display the list of attributes, which is what we see when we click on the map, but I can also refine those. So for example, I can choose which ones that I want to show. Name was one that I was interested in, as was acres. And I can also refine these. So for example, maybe I want to make this a proper case. We'll begin with a capital, and instead of having 2 decimal places, we'll make that 0 decimal places. And instead of name 10, this will be the, let's call this the area name. And we'll click OK. Once you've made some changes, click OK, and now you've applied those to the layer. And you can see I've kind of trimmed down the pop-up and made it a little more readable. There's other really interesting things that you can do. So let's go back and configure that pop-up again, and let's do something a little bit different. And all this is covered in the help, by the way, and you'll find blog topics which cover some of these things as well. Instead of just displaying a field of attributes, I want to make this a little bit nicer for viewers. So I'm going to create a custom attribute display, and I click Configure, and I can begin just by using some text. So I can say this is and I'm going to select one of the attributes to populate in here, and that was the area name. This is the area name, so that's what's in the curly brackets is actually the attribute itself, and the rest is just my text. And let's use the acreage as well. And I have a map where I've done these examples, and you can take a look at those if you need a little refresher course on this. But there's my custom attribute display. I'll also make it a little bit larger, and you can also do some other things like make some of the things bold. Let's make that bold and blue. Let's make the acres bold and blue as well. So bold and blue, and click OK, and now we have a much nicer attribute display. So some of these little map craft things actually do help make for a better story map because people will be exploring the maps that you author. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do is you might want to filter on different things in the map. So there's lots of different urban areas here, and maybe I want to focus on one of them. Actually, before I do that, let's just symbolize on the different areas. Right now, this is all green. I'm going to symbolize based on area name. So already I've got a nice little map which kind of shows the different urban areas based on color. And I can also do some interesting things if I'm using, say, for example, the imagery-based map. I might want to adjust the transparency so that I can maybe see through the imagery and look at the background. There's lots of different things that you can do to create the map that you want. In this case, though, let's do something. Oh, let me show you something else before we move on. For large content, you can also adjust the scale dependency. So here what I've done is when I zoom out, the layer is not displayed, becomes grayed out in contents. When I zoom in, then the layer is displayed. So you can use the scale dependency and transparency to make for a better map. You can also apply filters. So let's say, for example, I only want to tell a story around a particular area in this layer. So I'm choosing the attribute area name is, and let's just make a little pick list here. So I chose unique, and let's choose one of the areas here. Let's choose, how about Hemet? And I'll just apply that filter. So what this has done is it now only displays that part of the layer that matches that attribute query. If I want to go back in and remove the query, I just click or remove the filter. I can remove it here, or I can edit it, or I can even add and stack multiple filters. So let's just say that we're done at this point. So for this particular map, I might be done with using the Southern California Association of Governments data. The other thing that I might want to do is I might want to add some Living Atlas content on top of that. And I'll show you how to find this. So here I come back to add, and I browse Living Atlas layers. Suppose I'm interested in perhaps demographics for this area. So remove the search, and we're looking in the Living Atlas, and I can begin typing in keywords here. So I can look for demographic content by typing in a keyword, or I can remove the keyword and I can pop out the filters, and let's look for stuff to do with people and population. So there's a couple of different ways that you can filter for the information that you want. You can scroll down the list, and when you find something that's of interest, for example, this is population density from the Living Atlas, I can go ahead and use that plus button to add it to the map, or I can make a new map just using Living Atlas content. When I find something that I like, again, I can refine it by going back in the table of contents. And you can see this already has a nicely configured pop-up, which is very informative, but I can do the other things that I just showed you how to do. For example, I can come in here and I can adjust the transparency. I can do that at the sublayer. I can also do it at this level, at the top level. We can see this has many different sublayers of information depending on what scale we are on the map, but you can do the other adjustments that I just showed you. So let me show you another way that you can use Living Atlas content, and that is by going to the Living Atlas website. And this is also bookmarked in that group, or is one of the items in that group that'll open directly to the Browse tab in the Living Atlas. And here is where I can, again, I can search, I can type in a keyword. or I can search here based on category. So if I'm looking for population, income, spending, health, I can choose those, and that applies a filter. Here's where I can choose whether I'm looking for maps or layers or 3D scenes. Let's also just show a kind of another type of search. Here's one, I began typing Los Angeles and I found Los Angeles transit stops, and here's some interesting content which matches that from the Living Atlas. Let's take a look at one of those. I can learn more about it by looking at the item details, and I can also open it from here. This is an application which I could actually embed in my story map, but maybe what I'm looking for are layers that I can add to my map, or layers that I can use to build my own custom map. So here's a layer which shows transit stops throughout the greater Los Angeles area, and I can click and I can see this gives me information about what is within a quarter-mile walking distance from any of these transit stations. So again, the Living Atlas might give you some other interesting content that you can use to build your maps. Let's take a look at yet another place. This is the Southern California Association of Governments Open Data Portal. And here's a number of data categories. You can click on any of these to filter, or you can begin by typing in a keyword here. So I typed in urban, and here's the census urbanized area. This is what I used to build a map just a little while ago. It's presented to me in a little different way. I can look at the attributes that it contains here. Also here on the right, this is a little small, but hopefully you can see this. I can look at the metadata. There's a link here to create a story map, but that will open up the classic story map, or one of them. And so I'm saying avoid that for right now. I also got a little warning here. It said I must be signed in to create a story map. So you sign in with your same account credentials here. And I'm already signed in, so I'm just allowing it to use my credentials. And now I can go ahead and I can, from this open data portal, I can create a web map directly. So here I've opened up the urban areas. This one will open, and it will smart mapping will take over and look for a way to symbolize the data. By default, it's found the name of the urban area, and it's done just a simple thematic map of that area. So from here, all the other map craft that I've shown you applies, and you can do your transparencies, you can change your base maps, and you can configure attributes and do other things like that. So once you found the data that you want on the open data portal, then all the rest is the same experience. So let's move on now, and let's focus on story maps here. So first I want to highlight some places where you can find content. So here's Pixabay. I'm positive that many of you know this, but if I'm looking for some additional imagery and I'm making a story about transit, I can just search for that. All this is royalty free, free for any use. But one thing I do recommend that you do is that when you go to download the images, you'll see that there is that credits are provided. So it's always a good practice to provide credit where credit is due. So I recommend that you sort of copy this and add this to your story map to provide appropriate credit to the author. Unsplash is also another great place to go. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that most of the Unsplash imagery is also folded up under Pixabay, but at any rate, there's some other options for you to find some free to use imagery as well. Out on Vimeo, I found some videos from SCAG, so you'll be able to use those in your story maps if you want, and you'll also find some out on YouTube, and you might think to use those. So let's shift now. I've shown you the various places that you can find the SCAG content. I've shown you how you can leverage some of the Living Atlas content to complement that, and I've shown you some places to find some interesting media. Let's go ahead and let's do a story map. So when you sign in, you will be taken to a place called My Stories, and I have a link directly to that page, and you'll be presented with a sign-in. Authenticate with your ArcGIS credentials, and then you'll be here. You can see I've already created a few stories, and this is one that's included in the group. I'm going to open up this one, and we'll just take a quick look at it. So each of these stories begins with a header, and it can contain a title. It can contain even a video in the background. In this case, I just added a graphic, and I used some text blocks to add a title. This is an image block that I used to add the SCAG logo. So I introduced SCAG, and then the rest of this is really a collection of resources that you can click and link, and it explains how to do these. When you work within a story map, you work with what are called content blocks. So you pick the type of block that you want and you open it, look for the plus sign, and add the block. And I've added some examples of what some of these blocks look like. Here's an image. Notice that I've added the credits for the image here as well. And I've shown how in edit mode, how you have extra toolbars which help you align things. Here I've added a map. This is an Arcgis Online Web Map. You can see that the user experience lets someone expand it, look at it in full screen mode. And again, this is where the pop-ups come in. So I've got some nicely crafted pop-ups here, which are better than just a list of attributes. They kind of make this more compelling. That story can be reduced then. This is a special kind of map. This is unique to story maps. These are called express maps. And express maps are kind of neat because you can just hover over a location. You can also explore those in full screen mode as well. And if I click on one of these pop-ups, it will open up in the lower left in larger mode. So express maps are also something that you can add to your story maps, and I'll show you how to create these. So let's go back and let's create a new story. And we'll begin by styling or authoring our title page. So you give it a little title. You have an opportunity here to put in a subtitle if you like. And here's where you can add an image or add a video. So let's add an image. And I've got some images I downloaded from Pixabay. So this is a nighttime scene from the city of Los Angeles. So you can see right away we're off to a good start. We have a compelling photo which draws readers into my story. And here's where we can begin our topics. So I'll just give it a title, and we add another text block. And I'm not going to do too much typing here. You get the idea. You hit a carriage return and you'll find the plus sign, and that lets you choose what kind of content block that you want to add. And you can just experiment with these. They're just pretty self-explanatory. You can use separators to kind of highlight different sections. If you want to add an image, you use an image block, and then you can choose one of the images that you may have gotten. Here's where you'd add the caption, or here's where you add the credits for the photo. And in edit mode, you can see that you can adjust the size of the image depending on how you like it. You can even kind of push the image to the side, and then you can have additional text to the right of the image. So you can kind of mess around with these and see which ones you like. Let's take a look at maps now. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that an easy way to make your maps readily available while you're building a story map is to favorite them. So here I've favored those, a few of the maps, and I've got some examples here, and let's take a look at one of these. So one of the content layers I found is endangered species, and I applied a filter and I did some thematic mapping to show these or represent these on my map a little bit better. So I filtered just for the bat species. So this is a map of endangered species observations throughout the SCAG region that just pertain to bats. That was just something I crafted. When you're happy with how the map looks, you can zoom in, you can go ahead and place the map, and then it becomes part of the story. So there's that map that I crafted. It's now part of the story. The pop-ups are all there as I've styled them. And I can also choose what size I want that map to appear. Let's take a look at yet another kind of map. In this case, I will add a express map, and these are kind of neat. As the name implies, they're meant to enable you to build a map very, very quickly. So I can begin by entering a location. So we can maybe do something like Los Angeles, California. That might be a location that's of interest, but maybe what we really want is a location of the SCAG headquarters. So here's the SCAG website. It seems that the main office is on 900 Wilshire, so I'll just go ahead and copy that. We'll go to here. We'll paste 900 Wilshire Boulevard in the top, and there's the office location. There's the building. I want to use that, add it to the map, and you can see in the left, I can also refine how that pop-up looks. I might want to add a little bit of a thumbnail, perhaps, so a photo or something. I can change the title here, and I can also add a description for what I want to highlight on this map. And you can add multiple place marks. And you can also, here at the top, you can add other types of things. You can add arrows and areas and some text and things like that. So you can play around with that on your own, but this is my basic pop-up. When I'm happy with what I see, I can also go ahead and add that to my story map. And you just keep on going. One of the really interesting things about story maps is that what you add, there's lots of different things you can add, and I encourage you to add some of these other things that you'll find. A sidecar is pretty interesting. When you open up these, you're introduced through a little kind of a help tool which explains how to use this. This is a really interesting one where I can add text and titles on the left, and then in the middle I can add an image, a video, a map, or I can even embed something else in application. I'll just, to be simple here, I'll just go ahead and add an image, and you'll find some of these images I've used in my sample story map. If I want to go ahead and you can see it guides me. I want to add another slide. So this would be slide number 2, and I would add text for it over here on the left. I can also add other things. I could add a map even, or a video, or another image and separator. So all of those blocks are available here. And I can also add another image in this case, and let's choose this one. So I'll go ahead and add that. So you get the idea. What's interesting about this is that this is a really interesting way to expose people to like kind of a topic. So we see some pictures, and then we see some text scroll by on the left. You can also change the positioning of that and move left to right, and I can go on, but I think the best thing to do is just experiment, have fun with it, and then your story will become evident. An interesting thing about story maps is that the design also influences how some of these block items will look. One of the first things I can do is I can change the design of the cover. So if I don't want an immersive photograph, I can kind of adjust that here at the top. If I want to add a credits section at the end, I can kind of toggle that off or on. And if I want to choose a different theme here, a different color scheme, I can go ahead and choose it from here. So let's take a look at what this looks like now. One of the interesting things is you'll notice here in my Express map that the base map has now been changed, and even the color of my marker has now been changed, and even the color of the pop-up content. And that's because some of these blocks are driven by the design theme that you use to sort of harmonize things together. So you'll see that text and colors throughout will change based on the theme that you've chosen. So you can experiment with these and see how they impact. So here you can see the base map has changed again in this case using this design theme. When you're finished, what you want to do is come up here and publish. Right now, this story is only available to me. Obviously, if you want to submit this for the competition, you'll need to check this box. You want it to be public, and then click the publish button. It'll check your story for any issues, and after it's finished publishing your story, you'll get a nice congratulatory message, and here's my story. So this is what we've done so far. I've added a couple of text blocks. I've got a map in here with some configured pop-ups, and I've also added an express map, and this is that sidecar that we added as well. So what you do then to submit your story is this: copy the story URL. That's what you submit, and you're good to go. So I think with that, I've covered all the ground that I intend to cover. And if you want to open it up for questions, I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Yeah, do we have any questions from any of the students and guests in the Zoom group chat? You can feel free to either ask in there, or you can also unmute yourself and ask one online if you'd like.
One thing I kind of forgot to highlight here, which might be useful. This again is what you'll find. I'll place this in the. It is in the group right now, so you'll find this. And this just shows some of the ways that you can refine the SCAG data. So this is that endangered species layer that has been published. And again, what I did was I applied a filter, so you know how to do that. And I also applied a style. I did some thematic mapping to just show the bat species. And I believe here I also added some scale dependencies as well. And then I configured the pop-up. So you can open this map and you can take a look at what I've done to create the effects that you see here. One of the things that I did is I focused on Pomona. So I again applied a filter to the Los Angeles content to just zoom in on the Pomona area, and I did configure the pop-up so that the pop-up was a little bit nicer. Again, these are examples that you'll be able to see. I found bike routes, and I also filtered the bike routes and symbolized them a little bit differently. I filtered them for the Pomona area, and then I also adjusted the pop-up to present the information in more interesting ways. So this is another example that you'll find in that group, and you can learn from some of the filters and some of the styles and things like that for the layers that I have here.
Thank you, Bern. We do have a few questions in the group chat, one of which is, would you be available for questions as we develop our story maps for quality advice, troubleshooting, or anything like that?
I could be. I think I'll leave that up to you, Lyle.
Yeah. Yeah, in my opinion, if you have the availability and time, that would be great. What we can do is after the tutorial today, I can send a thank you to everybody that participated and everybody that RSVP'd, and I could also CC you on that. So if they would like to reach out to you, I just don't want you to be overwhelmed. So.
No, it's fine. And actually, we had a big conference next week, our developer summit and partner conference. And as of yesterday, it was canceled, so it's now a virtual conference. So I'm actually free of obligations next week. So I'm happy to help answer questions or help guide you to story map success.
Great. That's great to know. A few other notes that I would like to mention is that I was going to go over this at the beginning, but we'll just talk briefly about it now. Yeah, is that we do have some evaluation criteria that you could find on the pamphlet that's handed out. We're evaluating students on sustainability, looking at different aspects of sustainability, such as, whether the research covers emission reductions, land use, transportation, natural resources, active transportation, energy efficiency, and housing. Your research can really focus on a variety of those, or if they want to focus on one, what have you, that works out great. We're also looking at innovation, transferability, feasibility, and also presentation. How does it look? And so one of the questions we typically have is that what kind of SCAG data do we need to use? I know that a lot of students have already begun, doing research, whether that be a senior project or thesis or something of that matter. Basically, what we're really encouraging is the story map has to include at least one element of SCAG-related data, which it cannot be the administrative boundary. But say like you're looking at focusing on transit stops in the San Gabriel Valley, like focusing on the Gold Line areas. What you could do is utilize land use information from the SCAG data set, specifically in those areas where you're focusing on. You could also grab bike data from the open data source that we have. But yeah, so it has to be more than just the administrative boundaries and the city boundaries layer. It kind of has to encompass at least some element of SCAG data that we have available online. And I would be happy to answer any questions about that offline as well. My email is associated with everything. So you can feel free to reach out to me that way. But yeah, so with that being said, another note to talk about is, along with the final product, the link that you'll be sending, we are also requesting a user guide. It can be very brief, but basically you just want to show what does your story map do. So when someone scrolls through your story map, when you click on a button, does it take you to a new site? Does it just keep it on here? So we'll have a the pamphlet has a great list of the user guide that's required to submit as well. It's not too complicated, but yeah, once again, it's open to any students that are currently enrolled in universities or colleges within the SCAG region. You can be graduate students as well, and you could also have graduated within the last 12 months. So basically what we'll do is the abstracts are due on March 16th at 10 a.m. We'll get back to those that submit abstracts very quickly, because we want to make sure you have time to get started on your final product. And then those final story maps will be due March 30th at 10 a.m. as well. We have 4 prizes of totaling $6,000. We will have an internal best in show jury that will select 2 prizes, and then we will also have the day of the General Assembly. You will be encouraged to participate. We usually have one session where the students will actually get to present their story maps. And then from there, we'll have a voting at the General Assembly in Palm Desert, where attendees, elected officials, fellow students that are attending will be able to vote on who they think had the most creative, most innovative story map as well. So that is that. Bern, did you have any additional comments or
Yeah, there's just
notes?
one last thing I wanted to show, perhaps for some inspiration. I had a little trouble getting to this page. I'm not sure why, but so I had to go to incognito mode. But if you go to the overview, and that's one of the links in the PowerPoint PDF, you'll be here, and you can launch and sign in the story maps from here as well. But at the very bottom of this page, besides some useful information about how to build story maps, you'll see some pretty neat examples. And this is actually one of my current favorites. This is mapping Mount Everest, and maybe we're mapping the Everest of SCAG here, but this is a really well done story map, and you can get an idea of how some of the blocks have been effectively used. This is the one which adds an image but allows text on the right. This actually adds an interesting little 3D scene here. It adds some interesting graphics, some nice photographs. This is a sidecar that we took a quick look at, so you can experiment to see how these things work for you. But at any rate, on that page, you'll find some inspiration, some really cool story maps which will inspire you to think creatively about how you can leverage SCAG content to do your own.
Great. Well, with that, I believe that wraps up most of the tutorial. You can also, one of the ways that I found useful is to look at YouTube videos. If there's something specific with story maps that you're really interested in doing or exploring further, YouTube tutorials are out there with a plethora of resources. And Bern, it looks like you're moving over to the resources tab as well on that Arc Story Maps page, which is super helpful as well. So if do you have anything else on that page, Bern, you want to highlight?
No, again, you might want to take just a little bit of time and familiarize yourself with some of the techniques. And I think the best way to do that is just look at some stories that others have built, and that will give you some ideas about what you can build yourself.
Perfect. Well, with that, I think that wraps up the tutorial for today. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to email me at janicek@scag.ca.gov. I will also be sending a follow-up email for all those that RSVP'd, so that way you'll have my email address, and you can ask any questions towards me or to Bern. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has attended, and we look forward to seeing your abstracts come in on the 16th. Thank you. You can go ahead and end the meeting, Jennifer.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you.